That noon, the sun seemed to scorch every mile of Highway 287, the endless stretch of road between Longview and Fort Worth, Texas. Heat rose off the asphalt in shimmering waves, distorting the view ahead like a mirage. On both sides of the road, cotton fields had turned brown, scattered with old oak trees bending in the wind, and faded billboards flickered in the sunlight. Inside a charcoal gray SUV, Major General Simone Daniels, 46, sat quietly behind the wheel. No escort, no military convoy, no flags. Just a black woman in a light jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, her expression calm. It wasn't that she wanted to hide. She was used to being seen without truly being seen. Simone had commanded thousands of soldiers through 3 combat tours in the Middle East. She had walked through bullet-scarred zones and stood in negotiations where a single sentence could save or doom an entire unit. But today, all she needed was to arrive on time for a classified briefing at Fort Cavazos Army Base, a meeting known only to a handful of people in the Pentagon. No escort, because she didn't want attention. No guards, because she didn't need them. She had lived on battlefields. A rural Texas highway held no fear for her. At least, that's what she thought. The secure phone on the passenger seat beeped once. Signal lost. She glanced at the screen. No bars. Military communication, like justice, could be hard to find out here. Simone exhaled, scanning the road. Ahead on the right stood an old gas station, a peeling sign reading Henderson's fuel stop, the letter O dangling, ready to fall. Beside it were a few old pickups parked crookedly, several men in worn shirts and faded baseball caps leaning against them, smoking and talking over the wind whistle. Simone flicked on her blinker and pulled over. The tires crunched across cracked pavement, kicking up a veil of dust. She turned off the engine and looked around, a soldier's instinct making her observe everything tactically. Exits, cameras, and the distance between herself and others. Shadow sweeping briefly over the parched ground. For a few seconds, the world still seemed peaceful. But in Texas, sometimes a single misplaced glance is all it takes to turn a hero into a suspect. And from the gas station window, a pair of eyes was watching her, cold, suspicious, and ready for trouble. Inside the glass window of Henderson's fuel stop, Carol Henson, 55 years old, her blonde hair wound into a tight bun as stiff as wire, rested her hands on the scarred wooden counter worn down by years of use. That counter had seen hundreds of people pass through. Long-haul truckers, runaway college kids, soldiers on leave. But Carol had rarely seen anyone quite like the woman outside, standing in the parking lot, speaking in a cold, clipped tone, holding a strange black phone. Carol was used to reading people. She saw the baseball cap, the olive jacket, the unbranded sneakers, and the deep brown skin glinting under the sun. She saw no medals, no insignia, nothing that indicated official status. To her, it was just a stranger. And in small towns like Marion, Texas, a stranger could easily become a threat in someone's mind. Outside, Simone Daniels stood half-turned, her eyes sweeping the lot in practiced habit. Yet her voice remained calm and steady. Yes, Command. Receiving coordinates update. Secure channel maintained. The sound, alien to Carol's ears, carried the rhythm of coded language. She stepped back half a pace, her hand reaching for the beige landline that had connected to the Marion Police Department for over 20 years. Pulling the coiled cord taut, she bent her head low and spoke softly, just enough for the person on the other end to hear. "Yeah, we got a suspicious woman out here by the pumps. Real shady. Might be on something. Acting strange. Y'all better come check it out." The voice on the other end gave a short acknowledgement. Carol hung up before they could ask for details. She straightened up, inhaled deeply, and glanced outside again, her look shifting from suspicion to satisfaction. In her mind, she had just done the right thing, reporting to the people in charge. Across town in Marion, a police radio crackled inside a Ford Interceptor. Sergeant Rick Coleman set his coffee cup down on the dashboard and gave a dry laugh. "Another bored caller. Let's go check it out. Might break up the shift." Beside him, Officer Kyle Briggs nodded eagerly, eyes flashing with the overconfidence of a rookie. Finally, some action. They had shift in the air. A blackbird swooped onto the power line, croaking harshly. From a distance, Carol's face reappeared behind the window frame, her eyes locked on Simone, like the compass needle of prejudice. Simone drew in a slow breath, adjusting her stance. In the military, she'd once learned a short phrase: "Stay ready so you don't have to get ready." She didn't yet know that within minutes, that very principle would save her from the most public crisis of her life. From a distance, the wail of sirens tore through the air. Simone lifted her head, just in time to see red and blue lights flash across the gas station's glass windows. "Stay patrol." Two Ford Interceptors screeched into the lot, gravel crackling and popping beneath their tires as they braked hard. Simone ended her secure call, set the encrypted phone on the SUV's hood, and kept her hands visible. Each of her movements carried the frightening precision of someone who had survived war. The patrol car doors burst open. Sergeant Rick Coleman, broad, thick-necked, buzz-cut, eyes squinting in the sunlight, stepped out first. Behind him came Officer Kyle Briggs, a younger, lanky figure, his eager gaze shining with the thrill of a man waiting for some excitement. Rick tugged at his gun belt, voice dry and hard. "Ma'am, I need to see your ID and registration. Now." Simone nodded calmly, her voice steady, metronomic. "Of course, officer. My wallet's in my back pocket. I'll move slowly." She reached back deliberately, drew out her wallet, and produced her military ID and official travel orders stamped with the Department of Defense seal. "I'm Major General Simone Daniels, active duty, U.S. Army. I'm en route to Fort Cavazos on official orders." Kyle arched a brow, let out a short laugh, and turned to Rick. "General? Out here? With a rental?" Rick took the ID, glanced at it, then tossed it back onto the hood with a dull clack, the sound landing heavy with contempt. "Nice try. Fake's decent, though." Simone inhaled slowly. She looked at him, not angry, not afraid, only with the quiet sorrow of someone who had seen too much smallness masquerading as authority. "Sir, that's an official Pentagon ID. Please, call your supervisor. You're making a serious mistake." Kyle interjected, mocking. "Lady, you think we were born yesterday? You fit the profile. Acting weird, talking into some spy phone parked where nobody parks. That's enough for suspicion." Simone lowered her tone, still polite. "That spy phone is an encrypted device authorized by the Department of Defense. You can verify the serial number." Rick gave a dry laugh, stepping closer. Resisted, or called Washington directly. But she didn't. Instead, she met his eyes and spoke slowly, each word heavy as lead. "You're making the biggest mistake of your career." Rick said nothing. He grabbed her wrist and spun her around. Cold metal clamped against her skin. Click. Kyle seized her other arm, twisting it back. A faint pop came from her shoulder joint. But Simone didn't cry out. She only bit her lip, drew in a breath and stared straight ahead, into the smudged, greasy window of the gas station where her reflection appeared in handcuffs, in sunlight, under the eyes of strangers. Behind her the phone hit the ground. Clack, then crack, its screen shattering. From its speaker a faint but urgent voice came through. "General Daniels, do you copy? General, what's going on?" Neither officer heard it, or perhaps they chose not to. Rick shoved Simone against the side of the SUV. The clang of metal echoed through the lot. A few men nearby stopped what they were doing, but none stepped forward. Someone raised a phone and began to record. Kyle exhaled sharply, patting Rick's shoulder. "Got her." Simone bowed slightly, hair falling over her face as she drew a deep breath. In her mind, she recalled a lesson from her first year at West Point. Maintain composure when stripped of power. That's when leadership begins. In Washington, officers in the command room had already risen from their chairs, staring at the monitor filled with static interference. And in Texas, a U.S. general was being treated like a criminal, on the very soil she had sworn to defend. In a windowless room in Washington, D.C., fluorescent lights reflected off rows of glowing screens. At the center of the operations table, Lieutenant Commander Bryce Hanley stared at the blinking line on the display board. General Daniels, secure channel. Active. Error. Signal lost. A sharp, continuous beep pierced the room, repeating in a steady, unnerving rhythm. Hanley frowned, adjusted his headset, and lowered his voice. "General Daniels, this is Command Ops. Do you copy?" "General, respond." No answer. Only distorted noise, wind, gravel underfoot, then a loud thud, like someone hitting the side of a vehicle. Hanley looked up at another monitor where the internal feed displayed the last signal trace, a GPS point frozen on the outskirts of Marion, Texas. He swiveled in his chair, shouting toward the tech station. "Ping her location. I want a live trace now." A woman's voice cut through the air from the far end of the room, cold, sharp, and precise as a blade. "Do it, and patch me through to Fort Cavazos." It was Colonel Dana Sharp, the commanding officer of the Secure Communications Center. Her hair was pinned in a tight bun, her uniform flawless, her eyes carrying what others called the survival instincts of a battlefield, inside an office. The once busy room fell dead silent. Everyone knew, when a three-star general goes dark during a classified operation, all assumptions must be the worst possible. The data analyst turned his screen toward Sharp. "Ma'am, last the signal came from a fuel station off Highway 171. Population under 5,000. No nearby military assets." Sharp leaned over, scanned the coordinates, then straightened. "Get me Fort Cavazos command on a secure line. Tell them to mobilize QRF, Quick Reaction Force, immediately. And notify Pentagon Legal Liaison. If this turns into a federal breach, we'll need authorization in minutes, not hours." Hanley looked back at her, his voice low but weighted. "Ma'am, could it be a network dropout?" Sharp answered without hesitation. "Not with that signal. That was interference. Physical. She's been interrupted." Frantic rhythm of typing filled the air. In that room, fear didn't come from guns. It came from the silence of someone who once said, "I'm fine," and then disappeared. The Texas heat poured down like fire. The chorus of cicadas, the distant hum of engines, and the heavy breathing of the onlookers merged into a kind of deafening silence. General Simone Daniels sat against the faded concrete wall of the gas station, the handcuffs biting into her wrists, leaving deep red-purple marks. In front of her, Sergeant Rick Coleman stood with his hands on his hips, squinting down at her. "What's your real name?" his dry voice demanded. "Who you working for?" Officer Kyle Briggs cut in, leaning back smugly, like a man interrogating a criminal. Simone lifted her head. The sunlight stung her eyes, forcing her to squint, but her voice remained calm. Steady, deliberate, precise. "You already have my name. You already have my orders. Everything you need to know is in your hands." Rick let out a cold laugh, shaking his head. "Lady, you're about 2 seconds away from being booked for obstruction." She didn't answer. At West Point, they taught that sometimes silence is the loudest weapon. Her eyes swept the scene. A young man discreetly recording with his phone. Carol Henderson standing in front of the store, arms folded, a smug smile curling on her lips. A scene that seemed meaningless, but one that would soon make the entire nation stop and watch. Suddenly, Rick's radio crackled to life, the dispatcher's voice sharp and urgent. "Dispatch to Unit 4. Confirm you have detained the subject?" Rick grabbed the radio. Affirmative, female, early 40s, refusing to cooperate. A pause. Then the dispatcher's tone came back, clear and cutting like a blade. "Be advised, subject is flagged federal. Repeat, flagged federal. The Pentagon has initiated emergency contact. Release immediately and await further instruction." Rick blinked, confused. Kyle frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" Rick swallowed, his hand trembling slightly. "It means we're in deep trouble." He staggered forward, pulled the key from his belt, and unlocked the cuffs. The metallic click rang out like a gunshot. Simone lifted her wrists, slowly drawing them back, saying nothing. Her skin, dark under the blazing sun, showed the unmistakable imprint of the cuffs. Rick struggled to speak, his voice carried, clear and commanding with both authority and respect. "Are you injured, ma'am?" Simone rose, brushing the dust from her jeans. "Minor abrasions. The real injury was to their careers." The brief remark silenced the lot. A few people lowered their phones. Someone swallowed hard. Rick tried to speak. We didn't know who she was." Mosley turned toward him, his gaze cold as steel. "That's not an excuse, Sergeant. You had her credentials in your hand." Kyle tried to sound defiant. She was acting suspicious. Mosley stepped closer, cutting him off, his tone low, almost a whisper. "No. You saw a black woman on a phone call and made a choice. That choice will follow you for the rest of your life." No one said another word. Simone turned her head toward the gas station window, locking eyes with Carol for just a second, long enough for the woman's smirk to vanish. Carol stepped back, retreating into the shadows of the store. The Air Force security detail closed ranks around Simone in a protective formation. One of them opened the door of the center SUV and spoke quietly. "Ma'am, the Pentagon's been waiting for your confirmation." Simone nodded, her voice low but firm. "Then let's not keep them waiting." Rick remained still as she stepped into the vehicle, staring at the ground. The SUV convoy pulled away, tires crunching over gravel, a cloud of dust rising to blur the old sign of Henderson's fuel stop. In the rearview mirror, Simone saw the two officers standing there, one with his head bowed, the other clutching his cap. And she understood. Sometimes, justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up. The next morning, the world woke up to a single image. Two Texas police officers handcuff a middle-aged black woman under the blazing noon sun, beside a faded sign that reads, "Henderson's fuel stop." No struggle, no resistance. Only her calm voice saying, "I am a general in the United States Army." The footage was grainy, the angle tilted, but the image was crystal clear and painful. Within 6 hours, it spread to every major news outlet from Twitter to Facebook. CNN opened its morning segment with the headline, "Shocking footage from Marion, Texas. Local police detaining a U.S. Army general." Across the screen, captions rolled. Hashtag Justice for Daniels. Racial profiling in Texas. Pentagon confirms identity of General Simone Daniels. Fox News, MSNBC, and CBS aired the same clip, looping it repeatedly. A female reporter's voiceover echoed between soft piano notes. Sources confirmed that General Daniels, a decorated veteran with 29 years of service, was handcuffed by mistake during a phone briefing with the Pentagon. At cafes in Dallas, in Washington, in Atlanta, people froze mid-sip, eyes lifted toward the TV screens. In a predominantly black neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, an older woman wiped her tears. She kept her calm, and they still did that to her. At veterans' halls across the country, gray-haired men sat silently, not angry, just heavy with disappointment. In the small town of Marion, the modest police station suddenly became the eye of a national storm. Outside, reporters crowded together, microphones and cameras raised high. Chief Don Grady, a man more familiar with a hunting rifle than a press conference, stood sweating under the humid Texas sun, his voice trembling as he read from a sheet of paper. "We regret the misunderstanding. The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave, pending full review." A young reporter from Baton Rouge cut in, her tone sharp as steel. "Chief, why were trained officers unable to recognize federal military credentials clearly shown to them? Was race a factor in this misunderstanding?" Grady blinked rapidly, stammering. City was quiet, but at Fort Cavazos, the light in General Simone Daniels' office still burned. On her desk lay a stack of folders, her phone buzzing endlessly, calls from the Department of Defense, media advisors, veterans groups, even the White House. Simone answered each one with the same calm tone, no outrage, no self-pity. "Yes, I'll cooperate with the investigation. No, I don't want to file personal charges. This is bigger than me." She sat alone when the last call ended, and silence filled the room. The runway lights blinked faintly through the window like a heartbeat in the distance. Simone leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She wasn't tired from the incident. She was tired from how familiar it felt. 30 years of service, hundreds of medals, countless appearances on national television. Yet one afternoon had erased it all with a single prejudiced glance. She opened a small notebook, inside an old quote from her instructor at West Point. "Character is what you show when no one believes you." Simone stared at that line for a long moment. Then she closed the notebook and exhaled softly. Tomorrow, she knew, it would no longer just be her story. Saturday noon. The main gate of Fort Cavazos Army Base was packed. Under the blazing blue Texas sky, the steel fences gleamed like a boundary between two worlds. Inside, discipline, order, the military. Outside, the public, the press, cameras, and a sea of handmade signs. An elderly veteran held one up. "Respect is not optional." Next to him, a young white college student stood with tears streaming down her cheeks. She served the country. The country should serve her. The air was thick with anticipation. The whir of camera shutters, the low murmur of the crowd, and the distant hum of helicopters blend into a tense, electric silence. Then, the doors to the press room opened. General Simone Daniels stepped out in full-dress uniform, deep navy blue adorned with medals. Sunlight caught the brass buttons, glinting across a face calm and unshaken. No anger, no fear, only unwavering resolve. Beside her stood Colonel Darren Mosley, arms folded. Behind them, two Pentagon officials, a Department of Justice representative, and a White House liaison. They had prepared a safe speech for her, polished lines reviewed and cleared, designed to offend no one. Simone had read it, then folded it. "Not today," she said. She walked to the wooden podium. The microphones waited. A light breeze fluttered the American flag behind her. She looked straight ahead, past the reporters, past the cameras, into the homes of those watching, those who had been doubted, dismissed, or silenced. Her voice rang out, clear, low, each word etched into the ground. "My name is Major General Simone Daniels. I have spent 29 years serving this nation, leading soldiers, advising presidents, defending the Constitution." A pause. Even the air seemed to stop breathing. "Yesterday, in Marion, Texas, none of that mattered. I was not judged by the content of my service, nor by the uniform I've earned, but by the color of my skin, and by the assumptions made about me because of it." Sought. The light fell slantwise. The wind lifted the edge of her coat. Colonel Mosley snapped to attention, saluting her. Every soldier nearby followed suit. The applause swelled like a tide. Simone walked forward, not faster, not slower. Outside the gate, a little black girl sat on her father's shoulders, holding a small flag. As Simone passed, the child raised it high and shouted into the wind, "That's my general!" Simone paused for half a second, turned, and nodded gently. Then she walked on, standing tall, her shadow stretching long across the bright Texas road. As the crowd slowly dispersed, applause faded like receding waves. The gate of Fort Cavazos returned to silence. The Texas sun had softened. The wind carried traces of dust and the lingering heat of a long day. But the echo of what had happened remained. Everywhere. On phone screens, in coffee shops, on evening news broadcasts. The story of the woman who stood in quiet defiance against prejudice was being told. Again and again. Millions of times. The video continued to play, slower, zoomed closer. Every frame lingering on her eyes, on the handcuffs, on the moment she said, "I am a general in the United States Army." Each viewer saw something different. Some saw a soldier humiliated. Others saw a woman holding on to her dignity when all power around her collapsed. But for those who truly listened, they saw something greater. A lesson about power and how we choose to use it. Inside a small room on base, Simone Daniels sat alone. She unpinned each medal from her chest, setting them neatly on the wooden desk. There was no television, no ringing phone, only the slow spin of a ceiling fan and the last light of dusk spilling through the window. She opened her notebook and wrote in careful, steady strokes, "Dignity is not what you wear, it's how you stand, even when you're forced to kneel. And justice begins with those who refuse to bow." She closed the notebook, lifted her gaze toward the window. The American flag outside fluttered in the evening wind, bathed in amber light. Her face was calm, no anger left, only the quiet understanding that justice may be slow, but it never dies. The narration shifts outward to the viewer, to the listener. When you are mistreated, do not stay silent. Because silence is complicity with fear. Speak, even if your voice trembles. Stand, even when the world tells you to sit down. Sometimes, a single voice is enough to make the powerful bow their heads. If you believe that dignity, respect, and justice are not privileges, share this video so more people will know that truth still has a voice. Hit like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below so that every story is not just heard, but remembered. When you're treated unjustly, your voice is your greatest weapon. Deep Life Tales.